You pay a fortune for a vacation, hoping for peace, only to be trapped with a total lunatic. Whether it's in a hotel, on a plane, or at a resort, travel brings out the absolute worst in people. Today, we're looking at the most unhinged, ridiculous, and flat-out stupid complaints ever filed. From passengers offended by a neighbor's breathing, to guests suing over a judgmental dog, these stories are pure comedy gold. Here are 55 of the most absurd travel complaints ever recorded. 1. Wealth shaming took a weird turn when a passenger complained that their neighbor was using a $50 bill as a bookmark. They claimed this vulgar display of cash was an act of financial aggression designed to make them feel poor, and requested the neighbor be told to use a normal piece of paper. It is hard to imagine being so triggered by a piece of currency that isn't even yours. If someone's bookmark makes you feel inadequate, the problem is definitely your bank account, not their reading habits. 2. One flyer reported a grandma for brandishing dual-pronged spears that were actually just knitting needles. They claimed the clicking sound was her sharpening weapons for an attack and demanded she be restrained. Security had to explain that a half-finished wool scarf isn't a lethal threat. It's wild that a sweet grandmother could be mistaken for a professional assassin. Are we actually afraid of yarn now? Or have we just lost our minds at 30,000 feet? 3. At a Florida resort, a guest complained that the couple in the next room was smiling too much during breakfast. They weren't being loud. They were just clearly enjoying their honeymoon. The lady claimed their positivity was mocking her recent divorce and demanded a room change. If you find yourself filing a report because someone has a zest for life, the problem isn't the neighbors. Is it ever okay to be annoyed by someone else's happiness? Or is that just peak bitterness? 4. There is a special place in hell for the guy who complained his seatmate was looking out the window too often. He claimed the reflection of the clouds gave him a headache and demanded the crew force the shade down for the entire 8-hour flight. The audacity to tell someone they can't look at the sky while flying through it is next-level entitlement. If you hate the sun that much, buy a sleep mask and let the rest of us enjoy the $5,000 view. 5. Hydration shouldn't be a competitive sport, but one passenger complained that her neighbor was drinking water with too much enthusiasm. She claimed the rhythmic swallowing was a form of auditory dominance and demanded the crew limit him to one sip every 20 minutes to preserve the silence. It is mind-blowing how a basic biological necessity can be interpreted as a personal attack. If someone's thirst ruins your flight, maybe you are the one who needs to cool down. Is there a polite volume for drinking water? Or is this just next-level pettiness? 6. We've all heard of gross feet on planes, but one passenger complained their neighbor's feet were too clean. They claimed the feet were so pale and manicured that they were reflecting the overhead lights and causing a blinding glare on their iPad screen. It wasn't the smell, it was the sheer luminosity of the toes. At this point, travelers are just looking for things to be offended by. Would you rather sit next to a glowing, clean foot, or one that hasn't seen a shower in a decade? 7. A guy complained that his neighbor was typing too fast on a laptop. He claimed the speed of the keystrokes was a sign of hidden aggression, and that he felt physically threatened by the man's productivity. The crew had to explain that working isn't a federal offense. If the sound of a keyboard sends you into a panic, public transport isn't for you. Some people are so intimidated by someone else's hustle that they try to get it canceled at 30,000 feet. 8. Looking too comfortable while sleeping is a bizarrely common complaint. One woman reported her neighbor for looking regal and smug while napping in economy, claiming it was a calculated flex to show off how well he could sleep in a cramped space. She insisted that his peaceful expression was mocking her own insomnia and demanded the crew wake him up to level the playing field. Some travelers are so miserable that they literally cannot stand to see a stranger find a moment of peace. 9. A traveler in a pet-friendly hotel filed a complaint because the golden retriever in the next room looked at them judgingly in the hallway. They claimed the dog's gaze made them feel self-conscious about their outfit, and that the owner should be penalized for not training their pet to look away. If you are feeling judged by a creature that licks its own paws and eats grass, the issue is internal. Since when did we start caring what a dog thinks about our fashion choices? 10. One lady on a flight to Vegas complained that her neighbor smelled too much like expensive perfume. She didn't claim an allergy. She just said it was offensive that someone would flaunt their wealth through their scent while she was sitting in economy. She demanded the woman be wiped down with baby wipes. It's not enough to be comfortable anymore. Now we have to make sure our neighbors don't smell more successful than we are. Welcome to the era of weaponized envy. 11. You can't even blink in peace anymore. A traveler once complained that their neighbor was blinking with too much frequency and intensity, claiming the rapid movement was like a flickering light bulb that was giving them a migraine. They actually asked the flight attendant to give the person eye drops or tell them to keep their eyes closed for the rest of the flight to maintain a stable visual environment. If you're so sensitive to the biological functions of others, perhaps a private jet or a dark room is a better travel option for you. 12. Can a shirt be too bright for public transport? One flyer filed a grievance over their neighbor's neon Hawaiian outfit, claiming the fabric was literally vibrating in their peripheral vision and ruining their focus. Instead of just looking away, they wanted the airline to force the man to change into something more neutral. It takes incredible audacity to try and regulate someone else's wardrobe at 30,000 feet. If you could ban one clothing item from planes forever, what would it be? 13. Reporting someone for trying to eat a healthy snack sounds like a joke, but it actually happened. On a flight to Chicago, a lady claimed her neighbor's apple crunching was a form of physical assault on her eardrums and demanded a travel voucher for the trauma. The crew had to waste time explaining that eating fruit isn't a crime, and planes aren't soundproof chambers. It is wild how small natural sounds become a federal case the moment people step onto an aircraft. 14. Posture shaming is the latest trend in travel complaints. A passenger once reported their neighbor for sitting with their legs crossed in an unnecessarily elitist way. The complainant argued the man's regal posture was a nonverbal way of mocking their own slouch and demanded the crew tell him to sit like a normal person. It takes a special kind of insecurity to be insulted by a stranger's spinal alignment. If someone sits straighter than you, is it a deliberate flex? Or are you just projecting your own discomfort? 15. Parental entitlement reached a ridiculous new high when a traveler demanded their neighbor turn off a PG-13 action movie on their own private tablet. Their child wasn't even looking, but the parent insisted the violent energy from the screen was corrupting the air quality in their row. If you are that worried about invisible energy, maybe don't bring your kid into a metal tube filled with 100 stressed-out adults. It is a public flight, not your private living room where you hold the remote. 16. Hotel management once received a formal complaint from a woman who felt intimidated by a neighbor simply because he was too tall in the hallway. She claimed his height was a deliberate power move and requested he be moved to a room with a lower ceiling to humble him. Imagine being so deeply insecure that someone else's genetic makeup feels like a personal insult. Does anyone actually believe height is a choice, or is this lady just living in a fantasy world where everyone should shrink for her? 17. Turning a page shouldn't be a crime, but in a quiet resort library, a guest complained their neighbor was doing it with too much attitude. They claimed the flicking sound of the paper was dismissive and purposefully interrupted their deep meditation session. Management actually had to show up and remind them that a library is for reading, which usually involves the physical movement of paper. This is exactly what happens when people have too much vacation time and zero real problems to solve. 18. Being too quiet is a red flag for paranoid travelers. A woman on a train reported her neighbor because the man hadn't moved for 3 hours. She insisted he was a surveillance robot sent to gather data on her and demanded he be activated or removed. The poor guy was just an exhausted accountant taking a nap. Why do we assume every silent stranger is a character in a spy thriller? Is silence a sign of a secret mission or just a rare blessing we should all appreciate? 19. Losing your mind over 30 seconds of wait time is a skill reserved for the most entitled business class passengers. One traveler filed a formal complaint alleging extreme emotional distress because the person next to them was served their ginger ale first. High altitude seems to turn rational adults into entitled toddlers the moment the seatbelt sign goes off. 20. Visual standards for luggage might sound like a joke, but one traveler wanted their neighbor's bag moved because it was ugly. They claimed the clashing patterns gave them a migraine and that the airline should implement a visual standards policy for the overhead bins. They actually expected the flight crew to rearrange other people's property to suit their personal aesthetic. If you are worried about the fashion sense of someone else's suitcase, you definitely have zero perspective and way too much time on your hands. 21. Fashion police took to the skies when a passenger complained about their neighbor's choice to wear socks with sandals. This aesthetic tragedy apparently ruined their vacation mindset, prompting a demand for a formal dress code to ban open-toe shoes in the cabin. It is peak entitlement to think your ticket price includes the right to dictate someone else's footwear. If you were the pilot, would you actually consider landing the plane just to kick off a fashion offender? Or is bad style a human right? 22. Audio snobbery reached a fever pitch when a traveler reported their neighbor for using cheap, off-brand headphones. The faint, tinny sound leaking from the earbuds was labeled as auditory pollution, leading to a demand that the airline provide the neighbor with free noise-canceling replacements. Arguing that a premium seat should be a silent sanctuary, the passenger refused to tolerate even a whisper of low-quality bass. Some people really believe their ears are too precious for the realities of public transportation. 23. Feeling low class because of a neighbor's water bottle is a new level of snobbery. A woman on a flight to LA complained that her neighbor was drinking a budget brand of spring water, claiming it ruined the premium image of their row. Vana actually requested the crew move her or provide the man with an expensive bottle to match the aesthetic. It's hard to imagine being so status-obsessed that a plastic label causes a mental breakdown. Do you think people who act like this are actually wealthy or just trying to look the part? 24. Superhuman hearing is a curse for the world's most annoying travelers. One man complained that his neighbor's analog watch was ticking too aggressively and preventing his nap. He claimed the mechanical sound echoed through the cabin and demanded the man hide the watch in his carry-on bag immediately. The level of silence some people expect in a jet-powered metal tube is absolutely delusional. If the tiny tick of a wristwatch ruins your sleep, maybe just buy better earplugs instead of harassing your neighbors. 25. Cleanliness isn't always appreciated, especially when it involves lemon-scented hand sanitizer. A hotel guest complained to management that the person in the next room was using too much sanitizer in the hallway. This citrus smell was labeled as fraudulent because it allegedly gave a false sense of hygiene that couldn't possibly exist in a public space. Demanding a neighbor be reprimanded for over-sanitizing is a truly miserable way to spend a trip. Why spend your vacation finding reasons to be mad at someone for trying not to spread germs? 26. Financial insecurity takes weird forms at 30,000 feet. A business-class passenger once complained because the person in the seat next to them had the exact same laptop model. Feeling unoriginal and lesser than, they argued the airline should ensure an exclusive environment where common consumer goods aren't visible. This is what happens when your entire personality is built solely on the things you own. Have you ever been so embarrassed by a twin in public that you wanted to leave the room, or is this just pure insanity? 27. Neck pillow aesthetics caused a minor uprising on a bus ride through New England. A traveler complained that their neighbor's bright orange neck pillow was visually violent and clashing with the interior upholstery. Looking at the color supposedly caused motion sickness, leading to a demand that the neighbor hide the foam under a jacket. The sheer audacity to blame your nausea on a piece of bright fabric is legendary. It's a bus, not a curated art gallery, but some people refuse to accept that the world doesn't match their personal mood board. 28. Judging a neighbor's penmanship is a new level of petty. A passenger on a long-haul flight complained that the person next to them was writing a journal entry in highly stressful, messy handwriting. Catching glimpses of the disorganized scribbles allegedly caused secondhand anxiety, making it impossible for the complainant to relax. The flight attendant was actually asked to tell the man to write more neatly or stop entirely. If you're so bored that you're analyzing the cursive skills of a total stranger, you definitely need to find a better movie to watch. 29. Light pollution became a legal battle when a traveler complained their neighbor's phone screen was too bright. Even though the device was on its lowest setting, the passenger argued the dim glow was invading their retinal space and demanded a privacy screen. It is amazing how people ignore the bright sun outside but lose their minds over a 4-inch screen. Some travelers won't be happy until everyone around them sits in total darkness. Is a dim phone screen a valid reason to complain? Or are people just looking for conflict? 30. The swish-swish sound of a windbreaker jacket triggered a formal complaint in a hotel lobby. A guest insisted the jacket fabric was too loud and created sonic friction that disrupted the check-in line. This led to a demand that the neighbor remove the jacket before standing near them again. It's a special kind of entitlement to think you can control the sound of the clothes people wear. If you can't handle the sound of moving polyester, you probably shouldn't leave your house, let alone travel across the country. 31. Intelligence can apparently be a trigger in economy class. A traveler once filed a grievance because their neighbor was completing a difficult crossword puzzle too quickly. The complainant argued that the rapid-fire solving was a hostile display of intellectual superiority designed to make everyone else feel uneducated. They actually asked the flight attendant to give the man a simpler word search to level the playing field. Imagine being so insecure that someone else's vocabulary feels like a hate crime. Should we all hide our hobbies to avoid bruising a stranger's ego? 32. Is there a correct way to sneeze in public? One traveler didn't think so and filed a formal grievance because their neighbor's sneeze was too theatrical. They claimed the man was clearly exaggerating the volume to startle people and demanded a seat change because the sneeze lacked proper decorum. If you are at 30,000 feet, you have bigger things to worry about than the acoustics of a stranger's sinuses. Should loud sneezing be a finable offense on a plane, or are some people just born with high-volume biological functions? 33. Sparkling accessories became a major legal issue for a hotel guest who complained about their neighbor's glittery phone case in the lobby. The complainant argued that the sparkles caught the afternoon sun and sent a blinding beam of light directly into their eyes, which they classified as a deliberate physical assault. They actually wanted the hotel to implement a matte-only policy for electronic devices in common areas. When your day is ruined by a $10 piece of plastic from a mall kiosk, it might be time to reevaluate your life choices. 34. Reading over a stranger's shoulder is usually the height of rudeness, but one passenger flipped the script by complaining that their neighbor was a slow reader. He admitted to following along with the woman's book, but got frustrated because she took too long to turn the pages, effectively spoiling his rhythm. He actually asked the flight attendant to tell her to speed it up so he could finish the chapter before landing. The sheer nerve it takes to complain about the pace of someone else's private reading material is honestly legendary. 35. Tactical fashion caused a stir when a traveler complained about the excessive zippers on their neighbor's cargo pants. Every time the man moved, the metal tabs made a tiny clinking sound that the complainant described as psychological torture, similar to water dripping. They demanded the neighbor wrap his legs in a blanket to silence the metallic chatter for the rest of the trip. If the sound of a zipper is enough to break your spirit, maybe you should stick to private car travel instead of sitting in coach. 36. Reminders of mortality are apparently a valid reason for a lawsuit in some people's minds. A passenger once complained because their neighbor was reading an AARP magazine, which focuses on retirement and aging. The complainant argued that seeing the logo made them feel depressed about the passage of time, and requested the neighbor hide the publication or trade it for a fashion magazine. It takes a special kind of ego to expect a total stranger to censor their reading list just to protect your fragile sense of eternal youth. 37. Believe it or not, some people find silent food more annoying than the loud stuff. A traveler filed a report against their neighbor for eating marshmallows, claiming the lack of any crunch or scent was eerie and suspiciously quiet. They argued that the stealth eating made them feel like the neighbor was hiding something and demanded the crew inspect the bag for contraband. Is eating silent food actually weirder than munching on loud chips? Or was this person just looking for a reason to be paranoid? 38. A woman on a red-eye flight complained that the baby in the seat behind her was breathing too loudly. The kid wasn't crying or kicking, he was just existing. She told the crew that the sound of a sleeping infant was rhythmic and annoying, like a broken clock. She actually expected the parents to do something about their child's biological necessity to inhale oxygen. Some people act like the world is a private library, and they are the only ones with a membership card. 39. A woman on a flight called the crew to complain about her neighbor's elbow acting in a threatening manner. The man wasn't moving, but she claimed its mere presence near the armrest was psychological warfare. She demanded he be moved to the back immediately. Imagine being so fragile that a stationary joint ruins your trip. Does the person in the middle seat deserve both armrests by law, or should we just bring physical dividers to separate ourselves from these lunatics? 40. Tech envy reached a boiling point when a traveler complained that their neighbor's new iPad was too bright and crisp. They didn't claim it was hurting their eyes, they just said the superior screen quality made their own older tablet look ancient and embarrassing by comparison. They actually asked the crew to tell the man to put the device away, so they could enjoy their movie without feeling technologically inferior. Welcome to modern travel, where even having a better screen resolution than your neighbor is considered a personal insult. 41. Respiratory stalking became a thing on a flight to Tokyo when a passenger complained that their neighbor was breathing in perfect synchronization with them. The complainant claimed this was a form of nonverbal harassment designed to make them lose their own natural rhythm and demanded the person be told to hold their breath or change their pace. It is truly peak delusion to think a stranger is trying to hijack your lungs through the power of mimicry. If someone started breathing exactly like you, would you find it creepy or just a weird coincidence? 42. Organization can apparently be a crime if you do it too well. A traveler on a train complained that their neighbor's excessive use of labeled pouches was making them feel disorganized and anxious. Every time the neighbor pulled out a small, color-coded bag for chargers or snacks, the complainant felt personally attacked by the efficiency. They actually asked the conductor to tell the person to be more messy to help the rest of the carriage relax. Imagine being so triggered by a stranger's Ziploc bag collection that you have to file a formal report. 43. Productivity isn't the problem, it's the method. A business class passenger once filed a grievance because their neighbor was a hunt and peck typer, using only their index fingers. The complainant argued the erratic, slow rhythm was intellectually offensive compared to their own rapid-fire touch typing, and demanded the man be forced to use a tablet instead. It's hard to believe that the visual of someone looking for the Q key is enough to ruin a $1,000 flight experience. Does the way someone uses their laptop actually affect your journey, or should we all just mind our own business? 44. Accidental twinning led to a meltdown on a cruise ship when a guest complained that their neighbor in the cabin next door wore the same shade of teal 3 days in a row. They insisted the neighbor was stealing their aesthetic and diluting their visual impact during the nightly dinner service. The guest actually requested the staff provide a copy of the neighbor's wardrobe schedule so they could avoid further color clashes. Some people are so desperate to be the main character that they view a shared color palette as a declaration of war. 45. Left-handed people have it hard enough, but one traveler took it further by complaining that their neighbor was aggressively sinister. Because the neighbor was using their left hand to eat and write, the complainant felt the reversed physics of their movements was confusing their brain and causing a sense of vertigo. They demanded the lefty be moved to a seat where their unnatural movements wouldn't be visible. It's a special kind of ignorance to be offended by someone's dominant hand simply because it doesn't match your own. 46. Sub-vocalizing or whispering while reading triggered a formal complaint on a flight to Dallas. The passenger claimed the neighbor's ghostly murmurs were a form of low-level psychological warfare intended to keep them on edge. They insisted the neighbor was casting spells under their breath, when the poor guy was just trying to memorize his speech for a business conference. Why is it that the moment we enter a plane, every tiny human quirk suddenly feels like a deliberate plot against our personal sanity? 47. Paranoia hit a peak when a train passenger reported his neighbor for reading a mystery novel with a magnifying glass on the cover. He genuinely claimed the image was a coded message that he was being profiled by secret agents and demanded the man move to another carriage immediately. Some people really think the world revolves around their own mental chaos. Have you ever felt like a total stranger was sending you secret messages through their book choice? Or is this guy just losing his mind? 48. A woman in a hotel lobby filed a complaint because the person sitting opposite her had a book with an intense author photo on the back cover. She claimed the author's gaze was leering at her and making it impossible to enjoy her cocktail in peace. She demanded the guest flip the book over or move to another chair immediately. It's fascinating how some people can project an entire personality and motive onto a 2-inch printed photograph. Are we becoming a society that is literally afraid of eye contact with paper? 49. Boredom is apparently a weapon in the hands of the rich. A first-class passenger complained that their neighbor was looking too bored with the luxury amenities provided. They argued that the neighbor's lack of gratitude for the vintage champagne was ruining the high-vibe atmosphere of the cabin and making them feel guilty for enjoying themselves. They wanted the crew to remind the man to act more excited or move him to coach. It's a tough life when someone else's neutral expression ruins your 5-star experience and makes you feel vibeless. 50. Some complaints are so specific they defy logic. A guest at a high-end spa resort complained that the person in the next lounge chair smelled like nothing. They didn't mean they were clean. They claimed the neighbor's total lack of a discernible perfume or natural scent was unnaturally clinical and disturbingly robotic, which ruined their relaxation. They actually requested the neighbor be sprayed with a light mist of lavender just to make them feel human again. We've reached a point where even a lack of odor is a reason for a formal grievance. 51. Is there such a thing as being too nice? One traveler filed a report because their neighbor was aggressively polite. Every time the man moved, he apologized profusely, and every time snacks came around, he offered her the first pick. The complainant claimed this was a passive-aggressive dominance display designed to make her look like a jerk in front of the crew. She actually demanded he be told to stop being friendly and act like a normal, grumpy human. Have we reached a point where basic decency feels like a personal attack? 52. A frequent flyer filed a grievance against the guy in 12B for aggressive snoring. The catch? The man was wide awake reading a book. The complainant insisted he was breathing too deeply, which sounded like snoring in her head, distracting her from her crossword. This is what happens when imagination runs wild at 30,000 feet. Some people just want to be mad, and poor 12B was the designated villain of the day. 53. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but for one lady, it was a reason to call security. Vanna complained that her neighbor's face was suspiciously symmetrical, claiming it was clearly the result of too much plastic surgery and was offensive to look at. This synthetic appearance was apparently distracting her from her in-flight movie, so she demanded a seat change to someone with more organic flaws. If you are so bothered by a stranger's bone structure that you can't watch a film, the problem is definitely looking back at you in the mirror. 54. Imagine being reported for eating a loud sandwich. A traveler in a hotel lobby filed a grievance against a man because the sound of his lettuce crunching was audibly violent. The complainant argued that the structural integrity of the sub was causing too much noise and demanded the man be forced to finish his meal in a soundproof room. This is what happens when people mistake the real world for a private ASMR studio. Is there any food that is truly silent enough for these people? Or should we all just survive on nutrient-rich water? 55. The grand finale of stupidity involves a woman who complained that her neighbor was wearing an old-fashioned watch that didn't sync with the plane's GPS. She claimed the incorrect time on his wrist was creating a chronological rift in the row and giving her a headache from time zone confusion. She actually expected the flight attendant to force the man to take his watch off or reset it to her specific time. We've survived thousands of years of history just to end up in a metal tube with people who are terrified of a wristwatch. It is clear some people are just not built for the outside world. From being terrified of a grandma's knitting to hating a stranger's water bottle brand, the level of travel entitlement is legendary. A little altitude or a long bus ride can clearly turn a grown adult into a total toddler. Let's settle this in the comments. What is the one tiny harmless thing a stranger does that drives you absolutely insane? Is it their breathing, their outfit, or just their general vibe? Tell us your horror stories, hit like, and subscribe.